My father sold me the night I got my first period years later. I came back with the law. My name is Eden Graves. I am 24 years old, and I work as a victim advocate at a regional shelter for minors. The night I got my first period, my father arranged my wedding for sunrise. I was 12 years old. The groom was 43. There were folding chairs set up in the church hall. By 4 a.m. 17 witnesses expected, and my mother altered an off-white dress while I bled through my underwear in the bathroom. My father looked at me that night and said, "We have no daughter. She died today." What he didn't know was that I had already memorized the phone number on a pamphlet. A clinic nurse slipped into my backpack 3 weeks earlier. What happened next would take years, but it started that night with $11 and bare feet on gravel. Before I tell you what I did and how I came back, please take a moment to like and subscribe if stories about breaking cycles resonate with you. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back to when I first understood what my body would cost me. I was 8 years old when I watched my cousin Maya get promised to a man she had never spoken to. It was 3 days after her first period. She was 13. The man was 31. I remember sitting on the porch steps eating canned peaches from the can, while the adults talked inside. The screen door was open, and I could hear everything. My father Amos said, "A girl ripens fast. Better a husband than trouble." Maya's mother agreed. She sounded tired. I didn't understand then, but I watched Maya's face change over the next 6 months. She stopped smiling. She stopped speaking unless spoken to. At the wedding, she stood perfectly still while someone pinned flowers in her hair. Her eyes looked empty. I started paying attention after that. When I was 10, I asked my father why girls in our community stopped going to school after 6th grade while boys could finish. It was a genuine question. I liked school. I liked my teacher, Mrs. Holloway, who let me borrow library books about space and animals. My father didn't answer with words. He pulled his belt off and beat me until I couldn't stand. My mother held my arms down so I wouldn't fight back. When it was over, he leaned close and said, "Questions are how girls become rotten." My mother washed my back in the bathtub later. She didn't apologize. She said, "You have to learn." She was teaching me that asking for help wouldn't work. Nobody was coming. I stopped asking questions out loud, but I started listening harder. When I was 11, I was sitting in the kitchen folding dish towels when I heard a truck pull up outside. It was Silas Boone. He owned a repair shop and livestock. He was a deacon at the church. He was also 43 years old and had buried 2 wives. He came inside and sat at the kitchen table with my father. They drank coffee. I kept folding towels, trying to be invisible. Silas asked, "Has she started bleeding yet?" My father said, "Not yet." "Soon," Silas nodded. He stirred his coffee slowly. "I am willing to be generous if she is obedient." My father said, "She will be." They didn't look at me. They talked about me like I was livestock, like I was a truck part they were negotiating over. I folded the towels. I memorized every word. I understood then. A girl could be loved as long as she stayed useful, as long as she stayed quiet, as long as she didn't bleed yet. But once she did, she became something that needed to be controlled, contained, sold. I developed a system. I stayed silent. I observed. I remembered. I remembered names. I remembered phrases. I remembered the way men looked at me when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I remembered which adults asked my father when I would be ready. I remembered the exact tone my mother used when she talked about duty and family honor. I didn't have power, but I had memory. By the time I turned 12, I had watched 3 more girls in our community get married within weeks of their first periods. One was 14, one was 13, one was 12. Like me. None of them looked happy at their weddings. None of them went back to school. I saw one of them at church 6 months later. She had a black eye and moved like her ribs hurt. When I asked if she was okay, she looked at me with the same hollow expression Maya had. She said, "You will understand soon." I didn't want to understand. I wanted to run. But I was 12 years old with no money, no driver's license, no legal protection, and a father who believed daughters were property. Running without a plan would just mean getting dragged back and punished. So I waited. I watched. I memorized. And then, On a September night that smelled like cut grass and diesel exhaust, my body made the choice for me. Here is what I need you to understand about the deal my father made with Silas Boone. It wasn't just about tradition. It wasn't just about control. It was about money. Silas agreed to repair the roof on our house, which was leaking in 4 places and would cost at least $1,200 to fix properly. He agreed to provide truck parts for my father's failing Ford, which had been sitting on blocks for 8 months, and he agreed to cover a $4,700 livestock debt my father owed to a feed supplier in the next county. In exchange, he would get me, 12 years old, 6th grade education, 103 pounds. I was being traded like livestock, because that is what I was to them. If I stayed, I would be forced to marry a man 4 times my age. I would be pulled out of school permanently. I would be expected to cook, clean, obey, and produce children. As soon as my body allowed it. I would have no money of my own, no legal autonomy, no way to leave. Silas had a reputation. His first wife died in childbirth at 17. His second wife left him and was never seen again. People in the community whispered about her, but no one filed a missing person report. If I became his wife, I would disappear too. Maybe not physically, but everything that made me Eden would be erased. If I ran, I would lose my family name. My parents would disown me publicly. My younger brother would be taught to hate me. The community I grew up in would call me a traitor, a liar, a disgrace. But if I stayed, I would lose myself. And here's what haunted me most. If I stayed silent, if I let this happen to me without fighting, I would be teaching every younger girl in that community that this was normal, that this was survivable, that this was what love looked like. I thought about Maya's hollow eyes. I thought about the girl with the black eye who said, "You will understand soon." I thought about the 2 wives Silas had already buried or erased. Silence wasn't safety. It was permission. Every time a girl stayed quiet, she gave permission for the next girl to be sold too. Every time a family got away with this, another family learned it was acceptable. I didn't have power, but I had a choice. I could disappear into Silas Boone's house and become another ghost story, or I could make noise. I didn't know yet how to make noise loud enough to matter, but the chance would come faster than I expected. September 14th, 9:12 at night. I was in the bathroom under a buzzing yellow light bulb when I saw the blood. I stared at it for 30 seconds, maybe longer, trying to will it away, trying to rewind time, trying to make my body stop doing the one thing that would seal my fate. I cleaned myself up as quietly as I could. I used toilet paper. I tried to think. But my mother must have noticed I was taking too long. She knocked on the door. "Eden." I opened the door. She looked at my face. Then she looked down. She saw the blood on my underwear before I could hide it. Her expression didn't soften. It tightened. "Oh no," she whispered. Not like she was sad for me. Like I had done something wrong. Like I had failed. She called for my father. Amos came down the hall. My mother pointed at me. She didn't have to say anything. My father looked at me for a long moment, then he stepped outside. I heard him make a phone call on the porch. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard the tone. Satisfied, relieved. When he came back inside, he was different. Focused. "The wedding is tomorrow," he said sunrise. My mother went to the hallway closet and pulled out an off-white dress I had never seen before. It was too big. She laid it on the couch and started pinning the sides. I stood there in the bathroom doorway. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I asked, "How old is he?" My father turned and looked at me like I had said something obscene. "Old enough to keep you in line," my mother said. "You will not shame this family," I asked. "What time?" "Sunrise," my father repeated. 6:17. "Silas will be here at 5:30 with the pastor. Your uncle will bring the chairs. You will wear the dress. You will say the vows. You will not embarrass me," my mother added. "The wedding is tomorrow before she destroys anyone else." I didn't understand that line then, but I do now. They believed that my body was a weapon I could use to ruin their reputation if I wasn't locked down fast enough. I said, "I am 12, my father said, "Not anymore." In his mind, I had stopped being a child the moment I started bleeding. I had become a liability, a transaction. A problem with a solution. He told me to go to my room. I did. I sat on my bed. I listened to my mother's sewing machine hum in the living room. I listened to my father make more phone calls. I heard him say things like finally and before dawn and she will learn. I looked at the clock, 9:43. I had 8 hours and 34 minutes before Silas Boone arrived. I thought about Maya. I thought about the hollow-eyed girl at church. I thought about the pamphlet in my backpack, and I started making a plan. By midnight, I knew I had exactly one chance to stay alive, and it wasn't going to be in that house. 3 weeks before that night, I went to a free clinic with my mother. She needed a prescription refill. I sat in the waiting room flipping through a magazine about horses. A nurse practitioner named Ruth Delgado called me over while my mother was in the exam room. She crouched down to my eye level. She had kind eyes and a stethoscope with a butterfly sticker on it. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" she asked. I nodded. She looked at the bruise on my forearm from where my mother had grabbed me too hard the week before. She looked at the way I was sitting, shoulders hunched, making myself small. She didn't push. She just reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded pamphlet. It was pale blue. It said, "Know your rights" across the top in big letters. She handed it to me and said, "If somebody asks if you are safe, don't say I am okay. Answer the question." I took the pamphlet. I didn't understand why she gave it to me, but I knew enough to hide it in my backpack. Later that night, I read it under my blanket with a flashlight. It had phone numbers, hotlines, shelter addresses, county CPS offices. It had a section about forced marriage. It had a section about child rights. It had one sentence in bold: "If you are a minor, and someone is forcing you to marry an adult, this is illegal." I memorized the hotline number. I memorized the phrase. I memorized the county CPS address. I didn't know I would need it in 3 weeks. But Ruth Delgado handed me the key without knowing which door it would open. At 20:17 in the morning, I climbed out the laundry room window. I took $11 I had saved from birthday money over 2 years. I took the pamphlet. I took my school ID. I took a thin gray sweater my grandmother gave me before she died. I didn't take shoes. They were too loud. I ran. The gravel driveway tore up my feet, but I didn't stop. I ran past the church. I ran past the Boone's property. I ran until my lungs burned, and my vision blurred, and I couldn't hear footsteps behind me anymore. 1.8 miles. That is how far it was to the 24-hour gas station on Route 9. When I got there, my feet were bleeding. My sweater was soaked with sweat. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely open the door. The clerk behind the counter was a man in his 50s with a gray beard and a trucker hat. He looked up when I walked in. His expression shifted immediately. "Jesus, kid, you okay?" I said. "I need you to call the police." He hesitated. "What is going on?" I said it exactly the way I had practiced in my head. "I am 12 years old. My father is marrying me to a 43-year-old man in 4 hours. Please don't send me back with him." The clerk's face went pale. He picked up the phone. 20 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy arrived. Her name was Officer Landry. She crouched down like Ruth Delgado had and asked if I was hurt. I said not yet. She asked if I was a runaway. I said, "I am running from being sold." She started to ask me questions, but I could tell she thought I was exaggerating. I could tell she thought this was a teenager being dramatic about a boyfriend or a curfew. So I gave her details. I said, "Silas Boone. He owns Boone's Auto Repair on County Road 12. He is 43. He agreed to fix my father's roof and cover a $4,700 debt. The wedding is at New Covenant Church at 6:17 this morning. My father is Amos Graves. There will be 17 witnesses." Officer Landry stopped writing and looked at me. "You are 12. "Yes, madam. And your father arranged this?" "Yes, madam." She made a phone call, then another, then a third. A social worker named Tessa Milliken arrived 40 minutes later. She had short brown hair and glasses and a canvas bag with coloring books and juice boxes. She sat down next to me on the plastic bench outside the gas station and asked, "Do you want to go home?" I looked at her. "If you take me back, he will own me by breakfast." Tessa's jaw tightened. She nodded once. Okay, you are not going back. For the first time in 8 hours, I cried. Not because I was scared, because someone believed me. 12 years later, I walked back into that community. Not as a runaway, not as a victim. As someone with legal counsel and 12 years of receipts. The county was holding a community review meeting about protective services. My father thought it was routine bureaucracy. He showed up wearing a button-down shirt and a bolo tie, ready to complain about government overreach. There were 23 people in the room. County officials, social workers, a court liaison, 2 teachers from the local elementary school, a pediatrician, and Lorraine Hastings, the church organist who was 71 years old and had never forgotten what she heard that night. My father walked in and saw me sitting at the table. He froze. What is she doing here? Dana Mercer, the CPS director, gestured to the empty chair. Mr. Graves, please sit down. He sat. But he kept staring at me. His face was red. Dana started the meeting. We are here to discuss protective interventions connected to several cases involving minors at risk. Eden Graves has been consulting with our office, my father interrupted. She ran away, she lied. She has been lying for 12 years. I didn't react. I just looked at him, Dana said. Mr. Graves, you will have your chance to respond. Eden, would you like to begin? I nodded. I kept my voice calm. Even 12 years ago, I ran from my father's house because he arranged my marriage to an adult male. I was 12. The groom was 43. I reported it. I was placed in foster care. The case was investigated, but no charges were filed because no one would corroborate my testimony. My father said, because it was a lie, I ignored him. 2 months ago, 2 girls were removed from homes in this community. Both were 12. Both had recently started their periods. Both had been promised to adult men. The arrangements included financial exchanges. The language used was nearly identical to what I remember. Dana slid a folder across the table. One of those girls gave testimony. Her father said, "A girl ripens fast. Better a husband than trouble." The room went quiet. I looked at my father. You said that exact phrase when I was 8 years old when Maya got engaged. His jaw tightened. Coincidence. I pulled out a piece of paper. It was worn and creased. The pale blue pamphlet Ruth Delgado gave me. On the back, in my 12-year-old handwriting, were names, dates, phrases. I wrote these the night you told me I would marry Silas Boone. I wrote down everything I could remember. Names of men who asked when I would start bleeding. Amounts you owed, the time of the wedding. Sunrise 6:17. I slid it across the table. My father's face went pale. Dana looked at the pamphlet. Then she looked at him. Mr. Graves, did you arrange for Eden to marry Silas Boone? Number Lorraine Hastings stood up in the back of the room. Her voice shook, but it was clear. Yes, you did, Amos. Everyone turned to look at her. She continued. You called me at 10 p.m. on September 14th. You asked if I could play Come Thou Fount at sunrise. You said Eden was getting married and it needed to be fast because she had just become a woman. You said the wedding was at 6:17. My father's hands started shaking. Lorraine wasn't done. You also said, we have no daughter. She died today. I asked what you meant. You said puberty killed the child and made her a wife. Those were your exact words. The room erupted in whispers. Dana held up her hand for silence. My father tried to speak, but his voice cracked. She is confused. She is old. She doesn't remember, Lorraine said. I wrote it in my diary, Amos. I still have it. My father looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear. I leaned forward. I kept my voice steady. You told everyone I was dead. You were right. The 12-year-old you tried to sell. She is dead. But I am still here, and I brought paperwork. He slammed his hand on the table. You ungrateful, Dana interrupted. Mr. Graves, that is enough. My mother, who had been sitting silently in the back, finally spoke. Her voice was small. Eden, please. We were trying to protect you. I turned to her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. You held my arms down while he beat me for asking questions. You altered a wedding dress while I bled in the bathroom. That is not protection. That is selling a child and calling it love." She started crying. My father put his arm around her. He looked at me with rage. "You shame your blood for strangers," I said. I am telling strangers what my blood did to a child," Dana spoke. "This meeting is about patterns of coercive control targeting minors in this community. Eden's testimony is part of a larger review, 2 active cases. 4 families flagged for monitoring, and we are expanding the investigation." My father stood up. "I am done here." "Sit down, Mr. Graves." He didn't. He walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back and said, "You are no daughter of mine." I didn't flinch. "You said that 12 years ago. It stopped being a threat the moment I climbed out that window." He left. The door slammed behind him. My mother followed him. She didn't look back. I sat there. My hands weren't shaking. My voice hadn't broken. 23 witnesses watched my father walk out powerless. The same man who once decided my body was his to sell couldn't even stay in a room where I had a voice. That was the payoff. Not revenge. Just proof that he couldn't make me disappear. After the meeting, I signed coordination paperwork. I signed consent forms, allowing my case file to be used in protective services training. I signed an agreement to provide testimony if charges were ever filed. The 2 girls who had been removed from their homes stayed in protective custody. The county expanded its investigation into New Covenant Church. Silas Boone was flagged in the state database as a person of concern. My mother tried to call me that night. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Please," she said. Her voice was shaking. "He will never forgive me if you do this." I listened to it once. Then I deleted it. The next day, I got a text from my uncle. It said, "Your father says you are dead to this family." I read it, then I blocked the number. I thought about that phrase, "dead to this family." He had said it when I was 12. He was saying it again now. But this time, I wasn't 12 and terrified. I was 24 with a job and an apartment and legal representation. Being dead to them didn't hurt anymore. It was freedom. Tessa Milliken called me the next morning. She asked how I was doing. I said, "Tired. But okay." She said, "You set a boundary yesterday that most people never have the courage to set." I thought about that. "I didn't do it for revenge, I know," she said. "Revenge is staying quiet and letting it happen again." "You opened a door." I set clear terms. No private contact with my family. All communication through legal channels. If they wanted to talk, it would be documented, official. On record. I wasn't afraid of them anymore, but I also wasn't available. Tessa asked if I thought I would ever reconcile. I said, maybe. If they ever admit what they did was abuse. If they ever say the word out loud. But I am not holding my breath. That afternoon, I sat in my car for a few minutes before driving home. It was raining lightly. I thought about the 12-year-old girl who ran barefoot with $11 and a pamphlet. I thought about how terrified she was. I thought about how brave she was. And I thought about the 2 girls in foster care right now who wouldn't have to marry men 3 times their age. I started the engine. I drove home. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't look over my shoulder. The community split. Some people called me a liar. They said I was exaggerating. They said I was confused. They said I was being manipulated by outsiders who hated tradition. But some people quietly reached out. 3 weeks after the meeting, a woman I didn't know called the shelter. Her name was Clara Mendez. She said she had been married at 13. She said she had a daughter who was 11, and she was terrified. I helped her get connected to resources. 6 months later, Clara left her husband and took her daughter with her. A teacher from the elementary school called. She said there was a girl in her class who stopped coming to school after she turned 12. The family said she was needed at home. The teacher wanted to know if that was a warning sign. I said yes. CPS followed up. The girl came back to school 2 weeks later. These weren't dramatic rescues. They were small doors opening. One at a time, but my father's world got smaller. People stopped referring business to him. People stopped inviting him to church events. The pastor quietly asked Silas Boone to step down as deacon, after the county investigation started asking questions about his 2 dead wives. Silas moved to another county. My father's reputation never recovered. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved because the point was never to destroy him. The point was to stop him. 4 months after the meeting, my mother sent a letter. It was handwritten. 2 pages, it said. We did what we thought was right. We were following our faith. You have to understand we were trying to protect you. We gave you a good home. We fed you. We loved you. Why are you doing this to us? I read it twice. It wasn't an apology. It was a justification. It still refused to call what happened abuse. It still insisted that selling a 12-year-old child was love. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who thought we fed you as a defense. But my aunt, my father's younger sister, who I barely knew, reached out 6 months later. She sent a message through Facebook. I should have helped you, she wrote. I knew what was happening. I was too afraid to say anything. I am sorry, that mattered. It wasn't enough to undo anything. But it was honest. I wrote back, thank you for saying that. She asked if we could meet. I said maybe someday. I wasn't ready. 8 months after the meeting, I spoke at a training for school counselors. There were 73 people there. I taught them warning signs. I said, if a girl suddenly stops coming to school after puberty, ask why. If a family talks about a girl becoming a woman at 12 or 13, ask what that means. If a girl seems afraid, believe her. A counselor raised her hand. What if we are wrong? What if it is nothing? I said. Then you apologize and move on. But if you are right and you stay silent, that girl loses everything. Another counselor said, I had a student last year who kept saying her father was going to make her marry someone. I thought she was being dramatic. I didn't report it. She started crying. How do I live with that? I said. You listen better next time, and you tell people what you learned. That is the work. It is not one big dramatic moment. It is repetitive. It is phone calls and paperwork and training sessions. It is teaching people to see what has been invisible. 1 year after the meeting, I got a card in the mail. It was a graduation card. Inside, someone had written, I got older. Thank you. It was signed with just a first initial. I didn't know which girl sent it, but I kept it on my desk. I ran into Ruth Delgado at a conference about trauma-informed care. She was giving a presentation. She saw me in the audience and recognized me immediately. After her talk, she came over. She hugged me. She said, I hoped you made it out. I said, you handed me a pamphlet. I built a door with it. She cried. I didn't. I had done all my crying 12 years ago in a gas station parking lot. My father never faced criminal charges. The statute of limitations had passed on my case. The evidence for the newer cases involved different men. There wasn't enough to prosecute him directly. But he lost his power. And for men like him, that is worse than jail. Because jail ends. Being irrelevant doesn't. 2 girls didn't have to marry adult men. That is what mattered. Clara's daughter gets to stay in school. That is what mattered. A teacher knows what to look for now. That is what mattered. I didn't save the world. I just opened some doors and helped a few people walk through them. Today, I am sitting in my office at the shelter. It is after hours. The building is quiet. On my desk, there is a stack of intake folders, a cup of cold coffee, a box of hotline cards, and that graduation card that says I got older. I am 24. I have my own apartment with a cat named Marigold. I have a job where I help people. I have a therapist. I have friends who have never heard of New Covenant Church or Silas Boone or Amos Graves. I built a life from $11 and a pamphlet. Here is what I know now. Family is not whoever claims your body and calls it love. Family is not control dressed up as protection. Real family doesn't require your silence. What they called rebellion was a child trying to stay alive. What they called disobedience was self-preservation. What they called shame was just freedom wearing a different name. You don't owe access to people who needed your silence to feel powerful. You don't owe forgiveness to people who refuse to admit they hurt you. You don't owe performance to people who see you as property. If you are watching this, and someone has ever told you that your body isn't yours, I want you to know it is. If you have been told that asking questions makes you bad, I want you to know that curiosity isn't sin. It is survival. If you have been told that leaving means betrayal, staying isn't loyalty when the alternative is your safety, you deserve safety, you deserve education, you deserve a childhood that doesn't end the moment your body changes. You deserve to grow up without someone putting a price tag on you. And if you are a teacher, a nurse, a counselor, a neighbor who suspects something is wrong, if a child says they are afraid to go home, believe them. If someone calls control protection, pay attention. If a family isolates a girl after puberty, ask why. A child's safety matters more than a family's reputation. The day my father said, "We have no daughter. She died today," he thought he was erasing me. But that was the day I stopped belonging to them. That was the day I started belonging to myself. 12 years later, I came back. Not as his daughter, as someone with documentation, legal support, and a purpose. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to open the door I escaped through, to wedge it open, to make sure every girl who comes looking for it in the middle of the night knows it is there. Thank you for staying with me through this. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe. I want to hear from you. Have you ever been the first person in your family to break a cycle? Have you ever had to choose yourself over what everyone expected? Tell me in the comments. Check the description for resources about forced marriage prevention, child advocacy hotlines, and legal support. Until next time, stay safe, stay loud, and if you are the first person in your family to tell the truth, I hope you keep telling it.